They thought they had him cornered. 7 armed men against 1 bleeding target in the cold concrete belly of an underground parking garage. The garage sat beneath the old Morrison Hotel in downtown Chicago, a relic from the 1920s that still smelled of gasoline, rust, and forgotten sins. The target was Dominic Caruso, the most feared man in the Great Lakes region, the boss who had united the fractured crime families of Chicago under one iron fist. The man whose name made federal agents sweat and rival gangs disappear. Tonight, he was bleeding out against the hood of his own Mercedes, one hand pressed against the gunshot wound in his side, the other holding an empty Beretta. His charcoal suit, worth more than most people's monthly salary, was soaked through with blood that looked black in the dim fluorescent light. He was outgunned, outnumbered, out of time. The 7 men fanned out in a semicircle, their weapons trained on him. They wore mismatched tactical gear and ski masks, moving with the sloppy confidence of hired killers who thought they had already won. "End of the road, Caruso," the leader called out, his voice echoing off the concrete pillars. He raised a Mossberg shotgun, racking the slide with a sound that bounced through the empty garage like a death sentence. "Marchetti sends his regards." Dominic spat blood onto the oil-stained floor. Even now, cornered and dying, his eyes held the cold fury of a wounded predator. "Tell Marchetti," he growled, his voice wet with pain. "He's going to need more than 7 dogs to put me down." The leader laughed. The others laughed with him. They were so focused on the prize, so certain of their victory, that none of them noticed the girl. She stood in the shadows near the service elevator, wearing a black button-down shirt and a stained apron, holding 2 heavy garbage bags. Just another invisible worker taking out the trash at 2 in the morning. Just another nobody in a city full of nobodies. Elena Vasquez, 27 years old, bartender at the Rusty Nail, 2 months behind on rent, surviving on instant noodles and broken dreams. The hitmen didn't see her slip the garbage bag silently to the ground. They didn't notice her hand reach into her apron pocket, fingers wrapping around the heavy steel wine opener she always carried. They didn't register that her breathing had changed, that her posture had shifted from exhausted worker to something else entirely, something her father had spent 18 years training into her bones. The leader raised his shotgun, finger tightening on the trigger. "Say goodnight, Caruso." Elena moved. The most dangerous person in that parking garage wasn't the Mafia boss bleeding against his car. It was the girl holding a bag of garbage and a broken wine opener. And 7 men were about to learn that lesson the hard way. 3 hours earlier, the neon sign of the Rusty Nail buzzed with an irritating hum that seemed to drill directly into Elena Vasquez's temple. It was 11 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday in Chicago's South Side, and the bar smelled exactly like it always did. Stale beer, cigarette smoke that had seeped into the walls decades ago, and the sharp tang of cheap whiskey. Elena wiped down the counter, her movements mechanical, rehearsed through thousands of identical nights. At 27, she looked older. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, strands escaping to frame a face marked by exhaustion. The circles under her eyes told the story of double shifts and sleepless nights. Her hands were calloused from years of opening bottles, shaking cocktails, and scrubbing glasses until her knuckles cracked. She was invisible here, to the truckers hunched over their beers. She was just a pair of hands refilling their glasses. To the drunk businessmen loosening their ties after failed deals, she was a target for slurred pickup lines and wandering eyes. To the old regulars who came to drink away their pensions, she was furniture, part of the bar itself. Elena had learned to embrace the invisibility. It was safer that way. Her apartment was a shoebox in Pilsen, 400 square feet of peeling wallpaper, and a radiator that groaned like a dying animal. She was 2 months behind on rent. Her refrigerator contained half a bottle of hot sauce, 3 packets of instant ramen, and hope that had expired long ago. This was her life, pouring drinks for strangers, dodging grabby hands, counting tips that never quite added up to enough. Then the door opened at exactly 11:30 p.m. Elena didn't need to look up to know who it was. Every Tuesday and Thursday, same time, same man. Her hands kept moving, but her senses sharpened. Dominic Caruso walked in like he owned the place, which, for all she knew, he probably did. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Elena made in a year. His dark hair was swept back, silver threading through the temples. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes were the color of a winter storm, gray and cold and seeing everything. He moved to his usual booth in the back corner, always the same seat, always facing the door, a predator who never let anyone get behind him. Everyone in Chicago knew the Caruso family. They owned the construction companies that built the skyline. They controlled the unions that kept the city running. They had judges in their pockets and politicians on their payroll. On paper, they were legitimate businessmen. In reality, they were the closest thing Chicago had to royalty, the dangerous kind. Elena poured as usual without being asked. Whiskey neat. Jameson. He never finished it. He just sipped, checked his phone, and watched the street through the rain-streaked window. She had been serving him for 8 months. He had never spoken more than 2 words to her. But tonight, Elena noticed something different. His knuckles were bruised, fresh, and beneath the perfect suit, there was a tension in his shoulders, the coiled readiness of a man expecting trouble. She carried the whiskey to his table, keeping her face blank. Dominic Caruso looked up. Those storm-gray eyes met hers for just a moment, and Elena realized, with a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty door, that he had been watching her too. Elena set the whiskey down on Dominic's table, keeping her eyes lowered, her posture submissive. Rule number 1 of serving dangerous men. Don't be interesting. Your usual, sir. Dominic didn't respond. His gaze had shifted to the window, tracking something in the rain-slicked street outside. Elena turned to leave. The front door swung open. 2 police officers walked in, their uniforms dark with rain, their hands resting casually on their belts. They weren't here for drinks. Their eyes swept the room with the practiced efficiency of men looking for someone. Elena felt the shift in the air behind her. Without turning, she knew Dominic's hand had moved toward the inside of his jacket. The tension radiating from his booth was almost physical, a static charge that made the hair on her arms stand up. The cops were moving toward the back, toward him. Elena didn't think. Her body simply acted. She pivoted too fast, catching her hip on the edge of a nearby table. The tray in her hands tilted. 3 empty glasses crashed to the floor, shattering with an explosive sound that cut through the quiet bar like a gunshot. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." Elena dropped to her knees, her voice high and flustered. "I'm such a klutz. I'm so sorry." Every eye in the bar turned to her, including the cops. One of them chuckled. "Rough night, sweetheart?" "The worst," Elena said, scrambling to pick up the glass shards with trembling fingers. "My boss is going to kill me. These are the good glasses." The officers lost interest immediately. Just a clumsy bartender. Nothing to see. They wandered to the counter, ordered 2 coffees to go, and left without a second glance at the back booth. Elena finished cleaning up the glass. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She stood slowly, disposing of the shards in a nearby bin, and returned to Dominic's table to retrieve his empty tumbler. He was staring at her. It wasn't a look of gratitude. It was something far more unsettling. Assessment, calculation, like she was a puzzle he hadn't expected to find in a place like this. On the table next to his untouched whiskey sat $200 bills. "The whiskey is $12, Mr. Caruso," Elena said, her voice flat. "I don't need charity. You know my name." It wasn't a question. Everyone in Chicago knows your name. Dominic's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. He leaned back, studying her with those winter-gray eyes. "I know yours too, Elena. Even though you haven't worn your name tag in 2 months. The chill returned, sharper this time. Elena kept her face carefully blank, but her pulse quickened. "I lost it," she said. "You threw it away," Dominic corrected. "The same week you stopped taking the bus and started walking home through the alleys instead of the main streets." He picked up his whiskey, swirling the amber liquid. "Invisibility is a valuable skill. Don't lose it by making noise." He drained the glass in one swallow and set it down with a soft click. "Keep the money. Consider it payment for my peace of mind." Dominic Caruso stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out into the rain without looking back. Elena watched him go, the $200 untouched on the table, a strange knot of unease tightening in her stomach. He had been watching her, closely, for months. The question was, why? The rest of Elena's shift passed in a blur of drunk customers and sticky countertops. She couldn't shake the feeling of Dominic's eyes on her, even hours after he had left. The $200 still sat in her apron pocket, untouched. At 2 a.m., the rusty nail finally emptied. Elena locked the front door, finished wiping down the bar, and grabbed the garbage bags from the back. The dumpsters were in the parking garage beneath the old Morrison Hotel next door, a concrete tomb that always smelled of exhaust and decay. She took the service elevator down, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. Elena was halfway to the dumpster when she heard it, tires screaming against concrete. She dropped the garbage bags and pressed herself against a pillar, instinct taking over before thought could catch up. 2 black SUVs tore around the corner, their headlights cutting through the darkness like predator eyes. They screeched to a halt, blocking the exit ramp. Between them and the wall sat a silver Mercedes sedan. The driver's door was kicked open. Dominic Caruso stumbled out, one hand pressed against his side, the other holding a gun that trembled with each labored breath. Blood seeped through his fingers, dark and glossy in the dim light. 7 men poured out of the SUVs. Tactical gear, ski masks, weapons raised. "End of the road, Caruso," the leader shouted. "Marchetti sends his regards." Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. She should run. She should call 911. She should do anything except stand here watching a man die. But her body wouldn't move. Her father's voice echoed in her head, rising from memories she had spent years trying to bury. "The weapon isn't the knife, Elena. The weapon is you. The knife is just an extension. Identify the threat. Remove the threat." Her hand slipped into her apron pocket. The heavy steel wine opener was still there, solid and familiar. She had carried it every shift for 3 years. Not for opening bottles. For this. The leader raised his shotgun. "Say goodnight, Caruso." Elena grabbed a glass bottle from the recycling bin beside her and hurled it with terrifying precision. It shattered against the fluorescent light directly above the hitman, plunging that section of the garage into darkness. "What the hell?" someone screamed. Elena moved. She didn't run like a bartender fleeing danger. She ran low, silent, a shadow cutting through shadows. The first man never saw her coming. She drove the heavy end of the wine opener into the nerve cluster at the base of his skull. He dropped without a sound. She grabbed his falling body and shoved it into the second man, tangling his weapon. Gunshots exploded behind her. Dominic, seizing the chaos, had fired twice. 2 hitmen collapsed, clutching their legs. "Behind us!" someone screamed. Elena was already moving. She ducked under a swinging rifle, swept the third man's legs out from under him, and slammed her elbow into his temple. He crumpled. The leader spun toward her, shotgun rising. "You bitch!" he fired. Elena dove, sliding across the oil-slicked concrete. The blast tore through the air where her head had been a heartbeat ago. She ended her slide at his feet and drove the corkscrew of the wine opener through the top of his boot, pinning his foot to the floor. His scream echoed through the garage. Elena rose, twisted the shotgun from his grip, and slammed the stock across his jaw. The crack of bone was louder than any gunshot. Silence. 7 men lay scattered across the concrete, groaning, unconscious, bleeding. Elena stood in the center of the carnage, chest heaving, her black shirt splattered with oil and blood. She held the stolen shotgun in a grip that was too steady, too practiced, for any ordinary bartender. Dominic Caruso slid down against his Mercedes, staring at her with wide eyes. The shock on his face momentarily overrode his pain. "Elena," he rasped, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Who the hell are you?" Elena dropped the shotgun's magazine, cleared the chamber, and tossed the weapon aside. Her hands were trembling now, adrenaline fading, leaving her cold and hollow. "I think," she said, her voice shaking, "I'm going to need a new job." The adrenaline crash hit Elena like a freight train. Her hands shook so violently she could barely uncurl her fingers from around the wine opener. The steel was slick with blood now, warm and sticky against her palm. She stared at it for a long moment, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. 7 men. She had just taken down 7 armed men in under a minute. The skills she had buried for 8 years, the training she had sworn never to use again. All of it had come roaring back the moment danger appeared. Like muscle memory didn't care about promises made to dead fathers in empty cemeteries. A groan pulled her back to reality. Dominic was sliding down the side of his Mercedes, leaving a dark smear of blood against the silver paint. His face had gone gray, sweat beading on his forehead, his hand still pressed uselessly against the wound in his side. Elena moved without thinking. She dropped to her knees beside him, pulling off her apron and wadding it into a thick pad. "Move your hand," she ordered. "Don't touch," he started weakly. "Move your hand or you're going to bleed out in this parking garage, and all that dramatic villainy will be for nothing." Dominic let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it wasn't so wet with pain. He moved his hand. Elena pressed the makeshift bandage against the wound, hard. He hissed through his teeth, his head falling back against the tire. "If this had hit the femoral artery, you'd already be dead," Elena said, examining the wound with practiced efficiency. "Looks like a through and through on the oblique muscle. You're lucky." "Doesn't feel lucky," Dominic rasped. Sirens began to wail in the distance. The gunshots had finally summoned attention. Elena's head snapped up, calculating. "We need to move. Can you walk?" "Not the hospital." Dominic grabbed her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong for a man losing blood by the pint. "No cops. No hospitals. You've been shot. Mr. Caruso, you need a doctor? I have a doctor. His gray eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that cut through the pain. Take me to the harbor, warehouse 7. Can you do that? Elena stared at him. Every rational part of her brain screamed to leave him here, to disappear into the night and pretend none of this had ever happened. But she had already crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. My car's in the staff lot, she heard herself say. Can you stand? Getting Dominic to her rusted Honda Civic was an exercise in controlled chaos. He was heavy, all muscle and dead weight, and he kept trying to walk on his own like his pride was more important than his survival. Elena half carried, half dragged him across the garage, her sneakers squeaking on the oil-stained concrete. She shoved him into the passenger seat just as blue lights began flashing at the garage entrance. The engine sputtered twice before roaring to life. Elena slammed the car into reverse, cutting through a side exit and into the rain-soaked streets of Chicago. For several minutes, the only sound was the windshield wipers fighting against the downpour and Dominic's labored breathing. Then he spoke. Who taught you to fight like that? Elena's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. The question she had been dreading since the moment she threw that first bottle. My father, she said quietly. Military first, then private contracting. Blackwater. Other names you probably know. He wanted a son. It wasn't a question. Elena's jaw tightened. He got me instead. So he made do. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. He trained a weapon, Dominic murmured, his voice fading as blood loss pulled him toward unconsciousness, and hid it in a bar. Elena didn't respond. She just drove faster, the lights of the harbor growing closer through the rain. Behind them, the life she had built for 8 years crumbled into dust. There was no going back now. Warehouse 7 didn't look like the headquarters of Chicago's most powerful crime family. From the outside, it was just another rusting hulk along the harbor, surrounded by shipping containers and the skeletal frames of dormant cranes. The kind of place that looked abandoned, forgotten, invisible. Elena was beginning to understand that invisibility meant something different in Dominic Caruso's world. She flashed her headlights 3 times, a guess based on old movies and desperate hope. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the massive bay door began to roll upward, revealing a blinding white interior that contrasted violently with the grimy exterior. Elena drove inside. The warehouse transformed around her. Bright industrial lights, rows of luxury cars gleaming under protective covers, men in tailored suits moving with military precision, computer stations, security monitors, a small army operating in perfect, silent efficiency. Before she could even stop the car, weapons were drawn. A man appeared at her window, pressing a Glock against the glass with the casual ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times. He was tall, mid-40s, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, and eyes that held absolutely no warmth. Hands on the wheel, he barked. Don't move, she's with me. Dominic's voice was barely a whisper from the passenger seat, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Marco, she saved my life. Get the doctor. The man, Marco, didn't lower his weapon. His eyes flicked to Dominic, taking in the blood, the gray pallor, the makeshift bandage soaked through with crimson. Something shifted in his expression. Not softness. Recognition. Get Dr. Shen, Marco ordered over his shoulder. Now. The next few minutes were chaos. Hands pulled Dominic from the car. A medical team materialized from nowhere, already working on him as they rushed toward a back room. Elena sat frozen behind the wheel, watching the man she had saved disappear into the depths of the warehouse. Then Marco was back at her window, out of the car. It wasn't a request. Elena was escorted, not roughly but not gently either, through a maze of corridors to a room that looked nothing like a prison cell. Leather sofas, a mahogany desk, soft lighting, a bathroom with actual towels. It was nicer than her apartment, nicer than any place she had lived in the past 5 years. But the heavy steel door that locked from the outside told her exactly what this room really was. A gilded cage. Elena sat on the edge of the sofa, staring at her blood-stained hands. Dominic's blood. The blood of strangers she had beaten unconscious without hesitation. Her own blood from a cut she didn't remember getting. Her father's voice echoed in her skull, rising from the grave like it always did when she broke her promises. Once you pull the blade, Elena, you can never put it back. The normal life ends. You understand? It ends. She understood now. 8 years of anonymity, 8 years of bad tips and cheap apartments and pretending to be nobody special. All of it, erased in 40 seconds of violence she couldn't take back. She had stepped into a world that didn't let people leave. The hours crawled by. Elena paced. She tried the door. Locked. She considered the window. Barred. She thought about screaming, demanding answers, throwing furniture. Instead, she sat down and waited, because that was what survivors did. 2 hours later, the lock clicked open. Marco Benedetti stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "He's awake," Marco said. "He wants to see you." Elena rose on unsteady legs. "Is that good or bad?" Marco's scarred face didn't change. "With Mr. Caruso," he said, stepping aside. "It's usually both." The makeshift infirmary was cleaner than most hospitals Elena had seen. Dominic Caruso sat propped up in a medical bed, his torso wrapped in white bandages that stood out starkly against his olive skin. IV lines snaked into his arm. Monitors beeped a steady rhythm, but his eyes, those winter-gray eyes, were fully alert, sharp, dangerous. He was reading from a manila folder. "Elena Maria Vasquez," he said without looking up. "Born March 15th, 1998, in San Diego, California. Mother Rosa Vasquez, registered nurse, deceased 2010. Father Miguel Vasquez." Elena's blood turned to ice. "Delta Force, 2002 to 2011. Dominic continued, flipping a page. "Blackwater contractor, 2011 to 2018. Various private military operations across the Middle East and North Africa. Killed by an IED in Syria, October 2019. He looked up. Their eyes met. 3 months after his death, Elena Vasquez disappeared from every system. No credit cards, no social media, no forwarding address, until a bartender matching her description started working at the Rusty Nail 8 months ago. Elena said nothing. There was nothing to say. He had done his homework. Dominic closed the folder and tossed it onto the side table. "You ran from his enemies," he said, "or maybe from his employers. Either way, you built yourself a nice invisible life. No connections, no footprint, just a ghost pouring drinks and counting tips." "I didn't ask for your biography of my trauma," Elena said, her voice harder than she intended. "Why am I here? Because you're not invisible anymore." Dominic leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement. "One of the men you left breathing in that garage talked before he died. Marchetti knows you helped me. He has your license plate, your description, probably your address by now." The words hit her like physical blows. Her apartment, her things. The small, fragile life she had built from nothing, gone. "I saved your life," Elena said quietly. "And this is the consequence? This is reality." Dominic's voice held no apology. "You stepped into a war, Elena. By the laws of this world, you're a combatant now. You can't go back to your apartment. You can't go back to the bar. That woman is dead." Elena backed up until her shoulders hit the wall. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. "So what am I supposed to do? Disappear again? Start over in some other city? You could try." Dominic shrugged, then grimaced at the pain. "But Marchetti has a long memory and longer reach. He's already put a bounty on you. $75,000 for the bartender who interfered. You won't last a month." Silence hung between them, heavy and suffocating. "However," Dominic continued, "I pay my debts. You saved my life. I protect yours." He gestured to the chair beside his bed. "Work for me. Personal security. You clearly have the skills." Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Work for the Mafia? That's your solution? You wouldn't be working for the Mafia." Dominic's eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You'd be working for me. There's a difference. Is there? The difference is I'm the only person in this city who can keep you alive." He pointed to the chair again. "Sit down. Let's negotiate terms." Elena looked at the door, then at the window, then at the man in the bed who had just calmly explained that her entire life had been erased in a single night. The devil she knew, or the darkness she didn't. She walked to the chair and sat down. "I want dental," she said flatly. "Full coverage. And vision." Dominic Caruso stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a calculated response. It was a real laugh, deep and unexpected. The sound of genuine surprise from a man who probably hadn't been surprised in years. "Done," he said, still smiling. "Welcome to the family, Elena." The transition from Elena the bartender to Elena, the asset, wasn't smooth. It was a collision. The Caruso estate sat on a cliff in Lake Forest, 40 minutes north of Chicago's chaos. It was a fortress of glass and steel that jutted out over Lake Michigan like the prow of a ship, all sharp angles and cold beauty. The kind of place that appeared in architecture magazines and nightmares about wealth. Elena's guest suite was larger than her entire apartment in Pilsen. The bed was king-sized with sheets that felt like water against her skin. The bathroom had a rainfall shower and heated floors. The closet was filled with clothes in her exact size, tags still attached, ranging from casual to formal to tactical. "How does he know my measurements?" Elena had asked Marco on the first morning. "Mr. Caruso is very observant," Marco replied, his face a mask of professional indifference. "And we recovered your old uniform for reference." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the lake breeze. They had been to her apartment. They had touched her things. They had erased her. By the end of the first day, she learned the full extent of the erasure. Her apartment had been cleaned, which meant emptied and scrubbed of any evidence she had ever existed. Her Honda Civic was now a cube of crushed metal in a junkyard. Her employment records at the Rusty Nail showed she had quit without notice. And somewhere in the system, Elena Vasquez had officially moved to Texas to care for a sick grandmother who didn't exist. Her old life wasn't just over. It had been deleted. The first 3 days were a blur of testing. Marco Benedetti, it turned out, was more than just Dominic's right hand. He was the gatekeeper, the man who decided if Elena was an asset or a liability. They sparred in the basement gym, a state-of-the-art facility that smelled of rubber mats and old sweat. Marco was good. Military training, obviously. Efficient and brutal. But Elena was better. On the second day, she noticed him favoring his left leg. A slight hesitation when he pivoted. A micro wince when he pushed off too hard. She didn't exploit it. Not yet. She just filed it away. "Shrapnel?" she asked during a water break. Marco's eyes narrowed. "Fallujah, 2004. How did you know?" "You compensate with your hip when you turn left. My father had the same injury. Different war. Same limp." Marco stared at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his scarred face. Not warmth, exactly, but the first crack in his armor of suspicion. "You're good," he admitted. "Better than most of the men I've trained." "I know," Elena said simply. From the observation window above the gym, Dominic Caruso watched them spar. He should have been resting. Dr. Shen had ordered bed rest for at least a week, but Dominic had never been good at following orders, especially his own. He watched Elena move. Fast, precise, lethal. He had found something rare in that parking garage, a weapon that had chosen to save him instead of walking away. Now he just had to figure out what to do with her. The annual Chicago Arts Foundation Gala was not merely a charity event. It was a battlefield disguised in champagne and diamonds. The Art Institute of Chicago glittered like a jewel box that evening. Its grand halls filled with the city's elite. Politicians rubbed shoulders with hedge fund managers. Socialites air-kissed mob wives. And somewhere in the shadows, deals were made that would never appear on any tax return. Neutral ground. That was what Marco had called it. A place where enemies smiled at each other and postponed their murders until Monday. Elena had never felt more out of place in her life. The dress was black silk, floor-length, clinging to her body like a second skin. The back was open, exposing the lean muscles of her shoulders and spine. The slit ran dangerously high up her left thigh. Not for fashion, but for function. A compact Glock 19 was strapped to her leg, hidden but accessible. She descended the grand staircase of the estate, her heels clicking against the marble with each step. The dress moved like liquid shadow around her legs. Her dark hair was pinned up in an elegant twist that had taken her 45 minutes and 3 YouTube tutorials to achieve. Dominic was waiting in the foyer. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and stopped. The look on his face was something Elena had never seen before. His gray eyes darkened, tracking her movement down the stairs with an intensity that made the air feel thick. It wasn't the calculating assessment she had grown accustomed to. This was something rawer, hungrier, possessive. "You look." He paused, searching for words. "Adequate." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Adequate?" The corner of his mouth twitched. "Beautiful. You look beautiful, Elena." I was trying not to say it. "Why?" "Because it complicates things." Elena reached the bottom of the stairs, standing close enough to catch the scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and something darker underneath. "I can't run in heels this high," she said, deflecting. "If something happens, you won't need to run." Dominic stepped closer, his voice dropping to a murmur. "You just need to stand next to me and look like you belong. Can you do that? And if someone tries to shoot you, then you earn your dental plan." He offered his arm. Elena took it. The gala was a sensory assault. Crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across the marble floors. A string quartet playing something classical and forgettable. The clink of champagne flutes and the low hum of conversations worth millions of dollars. Elena catalogued everything. The waiter near the Monet whose jacket was too tight across the shoulders. Concealed carry. The state senator laughing too loudly with a woman half his wife's age. Affair. Probably being photographed by someone for leverage. The security detail by the east entrance. Professionals, not event staff. She had spent years being invisible. Now she used that skill to see everything others missed. Then the atmosphere shifted. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and Tony Marchetti walked through. He was older than Elena had expected, mid-40s, with slicked-back silver hair and a smile that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. Gold rings glittered on his thick fingers. His suit was expensive but tasteless, too shiny, too tight, screaming new money and old violence. 4 bodyguards flanked him like attack dogs on leashes. Marchetti walked directly toward them. Dominic. The name was a greeting and an insult wrapped together. I heard you had some trouble last week. Car problems, was it? Dominic's arm tensed under Elena's hand, but his face remained perfectly composed. Just some vermin in my garage, he replied coolly. Exterminator took care of it. Marchetti's eyes slid to Elena. He looked her up and down with undisguised contempt. The way men like him always looked at women. Objects to be assessed and dismissed. Pretty, he sneered. Is she the exterminator or just the decoration? The old Elena would have lowered her eyes, would have stayed silent, would have been invisible. The new Elena smiled. I'm the one who takes out the trash, she said, her voice carrying just far enough. Trash like you. A ripple of shock moved through the nearby circle. People didn't talk to Tony Marchetti like that, not if they wanted to keep breathing. Marchetti's smile vanished. His eyes narrowed into something reptilian. Careful, girl. Pretty things break easily. Dominic moved. One smooth step that placed his body between Elena and Marchetti, a wall of controlled fury. Touch her, Marchetti. His voice was soft, deadly, and I won't send a hit squad. I'll come to your house myself. I'll sit down with your wife, your children, and I'll explain to them exactly what kind of man you were. The threat hung in the air like poison. Marchetti held Dominic's gaze for a long moment. Then he laughed, a hollow, ugly sound. Enjoy your evening, Caruso. The night is young. He walked away, his entourage following like shadows. Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but her hands were steady. You shouldn't have said that, Dominic murmured, not looking at her. He insulted me. He's insulted people who are now buried in Lake Michigan. Dominic's hand found the small of her back, warm and firm. But I admit, watching his face was worth the risk. Elena almost smiled. Almost. The confrontation with Marchetti left a residue in the air, an electric tension that followed Dominic and Elena as they moved through the gala. People parted for them now, whispers trailing in their wake like smoke. Elena's senses were on high alert. Every face was a potential threat. Every movement catalogued and analyzed. They had just reached the edge of the main ballroom when a waiter approached. Champagne, sir? He was young, mid-20s, with a forgettable face and a crisp white uniform. He extended a silver tray with a single crystal flute, the golden liquid catching the light of the chandeliers. Dominic reached for the glass. Elena's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. Don't! Dominic froze, his gray eyes snapping to her face. The waiter's smile faltered. Is something wrong, miss? Elena didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on his hands. His left hand held the tray. His right hand hung at his side, fingers twitching almost imperceptibly. The tray? She said quietly to Dominic. He's holding it with his left hand. So, when he first approached, he was carrying it with his right. I saw him check his watch earlier. Right wrist. He's right-handed. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. He switched hands to pass you the glass. He didn't want to touch the rim. The waiter's face went pale. For a single heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the waiter bolted. He made it 3 steps before Marco materialized from nowhere, clotheslining him with a forearm that sent him crashing to the marble floor. The silver tray clattered across the ground, champagne spilling like liquid gold. The gala continued around them, oblivious. Music playing, laughter echoing. The beautiful people, too, absorbed in their own performances to notice the violence unfolding in the corner. Marco dragged the struggling waiter behind a service door. Elena and Dominic followed. In the narrow corridor, Marco pinned the man against the wall and searched him with brutal efficiency. Within seconds, he produced a small glass vial from the waiter's pocket. Digitalis, Marco said, holding it up to the light, concentrated. Enough to stop a heart in 30 seconds. Who sent you? Dominic's voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. The waiter was shaking now, tears streaming down his face. I don't know. I swear, I don't know. A man paid me $5,000, said it would just make you sick. I didn't know it would. He's useless. Marco's hand moved toward his holster. Leave him, Dominic ordered. Call the police. Let them deal with it. We don't need more bodies tonight. Marco nodded and dragged the sobbing waiter away. Silence settled over the corridor. Dominic stared at the champagne flute still sitting on the fallen tray, bubbles rising through the poisoned liquid like tiny prayers for the dead. Then he looked at Elena. The calculation was back in his eyes, but there was something else now, something that looked almost like wonder. "That's twice," he said softly. "Twice you've saved my life. You're running up quite a tab, Caruso. I always pay my debts." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Let's get out of here. I want to show you exactly how I plan to repay." Elena's breath caught in her throat. The way he was looking at her made her skin feel too tight, too warm. She nodded, not trusting her voice. They walked toward the exit, Dominic's hand resting on the small of her back. The gala swirled around them, oblivious to how close death had come in a champagne glass. But at the edge of the crowd, Elena saw something that made her blood freeze. Sal Romano, one of Dominic's lieutenants, stood near the coat check. She had seen him earlier, laughing with Marco, joking with the security team. A trusted man, a loyal soldier. He was looking across the room at Tony Marchetti, and as Elena watched, Sal gave a small nod. Marchetti nodded back. It was subtle, barely a movement, the kind of signal that would be invisible to anyone not trained to see it. But Elena saw it. The threat wasn't coming from outside. It wasn't Marchetti's hired guns or anonymous assassins. It was inside the house. Someone close to Dominic was feeding information to his enemies, and Elena had just watched them communicate. The ride back to the estate was charged with electric silence. Elena sat in the passenger seat of the armored Escalade, her mind racing through what she had seen. Sal Romano, the nod, Marchetti's acknowledgement. She should tell Dominic now, should warn him that there was a snake in his garden. But something held her back. She needed more. Proof. Certainty. Accusing one of Dominic's trusted men without evidence would make her look paranoid, or worse, like she was playing her own games. So she stayed silent, watching the Chicago skyline blur past the tinted windows. When they arrived at the penthouse, Dominic dismissed the security detail with a wave of his hand. "Leave us. I don't want to be disturbed." The guards exchanged glances but obeyed without question. The heavy doors closed behind them, and suddenly Elena was alone with Dominic Caruso in his glass fortress above the city. The penthouse was all sharp angles and cold surfaces. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan, the water black and endless under the night sky. City lights glittered like fallen stars in the distance. Dominic loosened his tie, tossing his jacket onto the leather sofa. He moved to the bar and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Real crystal, expensive scotch. He handed one to Elena. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. "Why did you stay?" Dominic asked, his voice low. Elena took a sip, letting the burn distract her from the intensity of his gaze. "What do you mean? That first night? In the garage. You could have run. You could have let them kill me and walked away. No one would have known." He stepped closer. "Why did you stay?" Elena stared into her glass. The amber liquid trembled slightly, betraying the steadiness she was trying to project. "I was tired of running," she said finally. 8 years of being nobody. 8 years of hiding in plain sight, pretending to be less than I am." She looked up at him. "Maybe I was tired of being invisible." Dominic set down his glass. He moved toward her with the slow deliberation of a predator, each step closing the distance between them. "I see you, Elena." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. His touch was warm, gentle, completely at odds with the violence she knew those hands were capable of. "I see the fire," he murmured. "I see the soldier. I see the woman underneath all those walls you've built." Elena's breath caught. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to pull away, to maintain the professional distance that kept her safe. Instead, she leaned into his touch. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "The worst," he agreed. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was desperate, fueled by adrenaline and near death and the intoxicating danger of wanting something forbidden. Elena kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. For one perfect moment, the war outside didn't exist. Then Elena heard it. A soft click, almost inaudible, the sound of a magnetic lock disengaging. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She shoved Dominic hard, sending him stumbling backward just as the window behind them exploded. The bullet passed through the space where his head had been a heartbeat ago. Glass rained down like deadly confetti. Elena hit the floor, dragging Dominic behind the heavy oak desk as more shots punched through the windows, each impact a thunderclap in the enclosed space. "They're inside!" Elena screamed over the gunfire. "The locks are down!" The lights died. Emergency reds flickered on, bathing everything in a bloody glow. Dominic pulled a handgun from beneath the desk, his face a mask of cold fury. "My security system is hardwired. It can't be hacked from outside." Then someone opened the door from inside. Elena met his eyes through the crimson darkness. "Sal." I saw him signal Marchetti at the gala. A nod, an acknowledgement. "He's been feeding them information." Dominic's jaw tightened. 10 years. Sal had been with him for 10 years. But there was no time for betrayal to sink in. The study door burst open, and men in tactical gear poured through. These weren't street thugs with cheap guns and sloppy training. These were professionals. They moved in perfect formation, tactical lights cutting through the red emergency glow, their weapons sweeping the room with practiced efficiency. Body armor, night vision, military-grade equipment. Someone had spent serious money on this kill team. Elena fired twice from behind the desk, forcing the lead man to take cover. Dominic rose beside her, his Beretta barking 3 times in rapid succession. One of the attackers went down, clutching his shoulder. "How many?" Dominic shouted over the gunfire. Elena risked a glance. 6 in the room, more in the hallway. Bullets chewed through the oak desk, splinters flying like wooden shrapnel. They were being flanked. Another 30 seconds and they would be surrounded. "Elevator?" Elena asked. "Compromised." "Stairs?" They came from the stairs. "Roof? Helicopter pad? But they'll have men covering it." Elena's mind raced through the options. Panic room was a death trap. If the enemy controlled the building, they would just wait them out, or pump in gas. Every conventional exit was blocked. That left unconventional. "The windows," Elena said. "We jump." Dominic stared at her like she had lost her mind. "We're on the 3rd floor." "Elena, 3 stories above a cliff that drops straight into Lake Michigan. Not straight down. There's a terrace below us with a sloped roof. We hit that. We slide. We catch the edge. We climb down." "That's insane. That's survival." A grenade rolled through the doorway. "Move!" Elena grabbed Dominic's arm and sprinted toward the floor-to-ceiling window on the far side of the room. They fired simultaneously at the corners of the glass, hitting the stress points where the reinforced panels were weakest. The glass cracked. Spiderwebbed. Held. Elena didn't slow down. She grabbed a heavy iron sculpture from a side table and hurled it at the weakened window. The glass exploded outward just as the grenade detonated behind them. The blast wave hit Elena like a giant's fist, lifting her off her feet and throwing her through the shattered window into the void. Cold air, darkness, the roar of the explosion mixing with the rush of wind, then impact. Elena hit the sloped slate roof of the lower terrace hard, her shoulder taking the brunt of the fall. Pain exploded through her body, but she was already sliding, the smooth tiles offering no grip. She twisted, clawing at the surface, her fingernails scraping uselessly against stone. The edge rushed toward her. Her hand caught the gutter at the last possible second, her arm wrenching in its socket with a sickening pop. She screamed, but she held on. Dominic slid past her. Time slowed. Elena saw his eyes widen, saw his hand reach for her, saw him go over the edge into empty darkness. She released one hand from the gutter and grabbed his wrist. The weight nearly tore her arm from her body. Dominic dangled 3 stories above the rocks and the churning black water of Lake Michigan, his entire existence depending on Elena's grip. "Let go," he shouted over the wind. "You can't hold me. You'll fall. Shut up." Elena's face contorted with effort, tears of pain streaming down her cheeks. "I am not losing my dental plan," she pulled. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. The gutter groaned under their combined weight, bolts straining against the wood. Inch by agonizing inch, she hauled him upward. Dominic's free hand found the edge of the roof. He scrambled up, rolling onto the slate beside her. For a moment, they both lay there, gasping, staring up at the penthouse that was now fully engulfed in flames. "You're insane," Dominic wheezed. "You hired me. They couldn't stay. The fire would bring emergency services, and Sal's men would be searching the grounds." Elena forced herself to move. Her shoulder screamed in protest, probably dislocated, but she pushed the pain aside. They climbed down a trellis covered in dead winter vines, dropping into the manicured gardens behind the estate. The mansion burned above them, orange flames licking at the night sky, black smoke blotting out the stars. Everything Dominic had built, his home, his fortress, gone, but they were alive. Elena grabbed his hand in the darkness, and together they ran, disappearing into the shadows of the Lake Forest estate while sirens began to wail in the distance. They reached the detached garage through the servants' garden, staying low in the shadows. Elena's shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat, the joint grinding in ways joints weren't supposed to grind. She had popped it back into place against a tree trunk, biting down on her own fist to keep from screaming. It would need real medical attention soon, but soon was a luxury they didn't have. The garage housed Dominic's collection. Even in the darkness, Elena could make out the silhouettes of expensive machinery, Ferraris, Bentleys, a Lamborghini that probably cost more than her entire life's earnings. Keys are on the electronic system, Dominic said grimly. Sal has access to all of them, so we're trapped. Not entirely. Dominic moved toward the back of the garage, past the gleaming modern vehicles to something older, something that didn't belong among the Italian exotics. A 1970 Ford Mustang Boss 429, black as midnight, chrome accents dulled with age, sitting on the concrete like a sleeping predator. It was beautiful in a brutal, honest way that the other cars couldn't match. My father's, Dominic said quietly. He bought it the year I was born. It's completely mechanical. No chips, no electronic ignition, no key fob. No key either, Elena observed. Can you start it? Elena was already sliding into the driver's seat. She reached under the dashboard, feeling for the wires she needed. Her fingers found them in the darkness. Muscle memory from a childhood spent learning skills no child should know. My father believed in practical education, she muttered, stripping insulation with her fingernails. Other kids learned piano. I learned to hotwire cars and field strip rifles. Spark. Connection. The Mustang roared to life, its engine a thunderous growl that shook the garage walls. 29 seconds. Headlights blazed outside. Shouts. The garage door began sliding down, trapping them inside. They found us, Elena yelled. Dominic was already in the passenger seat. Drive! Elena slammed the car into gear. The Mustang's tires screamed against the concrete, the massive engine hurling them forward like a bullet from a gun. They hit the closing garage door at 40 miles per hour. Wood exploded around them. Metal shrieked. The windshield cracked but held. Bullets sparked off the trunk as they tore down the driveway, the burning mansion growing smaller in the rearview mirror. Rain began to fall, heavy sheets that blurred the road ahead. Elena pushed the accelerator to the floor, weaving through the estate's private roads until they hit the main highway heading north. For several miles, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the rumble of the engine, the rhythm of the wipers, and the distant fading of sirens. Finally, Elena reached over and placed her hand on Dominic's where it rested on the gearshift. His fingers were cold, trembling slightly. Not from fear, from rage held barely in check. He turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. The grip was tight, almost painful. Where do we go? Elena asked softly. Dominic stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscles jumping beneath his skin. My family has a cabin, deep in Wisconsin. No electronics, no satellite tracking, off every grid that exists. His voice was flat, emptied of everything except cold purpose. We go there, we heal, and then, he looked at her, and his gray eyes held something terrifying in the dashboard light. Not anger, something beyond anger, the absolute certainty of a man who had nothing left to lose. Then we come back, and we kill them all. Elena looked out at the rain-streaked darkness rushing past. Okay, she said quietly. We kill them all. But as the miles disappeared beneath them, Elena's mind kept circling back to a single truth. Sal Romano was a follower, a dog. He didn't have the intelligence or the ambition to orchestrate something this sophisticated. Someone else was pulling the strings. Someone who knew Dominic's security codes. Someone who knew the layout of the house, the patrol schedules, the vulnerabilities. Someone very close, and Elena had a sickening suspicion she knew exactly who it was. The cabin was a ghost hiding in the wilderness, 40 miles off the main highway, deep in the frozen heart of Wisconsin's Northwoods. It was invisible to satellite imaging thanks to the dense canopy of ancient pines. No address, no mailbox, no evidence it existed at all except for a dirt track that disappeared into the forest like a secret. Elena pulled the Mustang into a weathered barn, the engine ticking as it cooled in the silence. The sound was swallowed by the absolute stillness of the woods, a quiet so complete it felt like pressure against her eardrums. Inside, Dominic ordered, his voice tight with pain, before hypothermia sets in. The cabin was freezing, untouched for months. Elena moved with the efficiency of a soldier, lighting the wood stove, finding the hidden generator out back, coaxing the lights to flicker on. Then she raided the emergency supplies under the floorboards and turned her attention to Dominic. His original gunshot wound had torn open during their escape. Blood seeped through his shirt, mixing with dozens of cuts from the shattered window. Glass fragments glittered in the firelight like embedded diamonds. "This is going to hurt," Elena warned, holding a bottle of iodine and a suture kit. Dominic unbuttoned his ruined shirt without complaint. "Do it." She worked in focused silence, cleaning each wound, extracting glass with tweezers, stitching torn flesh with steady hands. Dominic didn't scream. He barely breathed. Only the cords of muscle standing out in his neck betrayed the agony. "Your hands," he rasped, watching her face as she tied off the final suture. "They're like a surgeon's." Elena secured the bandage, her fingers gentle despite their calluses. "My mother was a nurse. She taught me how to heal." She paused, a shadow crossing her features. "My father taught me how to hurt. I guess I'm the perfect balance." For 2 days, the world outside ceased to exist. They ate canned peaches and beef jerky, drank instant coffee that tasted like desperation. They slept in shifts, one always watching the windows, though no one came. The snow fell steadily, erasing their tracks, burying them in white silence. On the second night, Elena found Dominic sitting by the fire, cleaning a Glock 19 he had retrieved from a hidden compartment. The flames painted shadows across his face, highlighting the exhaustion he usually hid so well. She sat beside him on the worn rug, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Tell me," she said quietly, "about your family." Dominic was silent for a long moment, his hands still on the disassembled weapon. "My grandfather built the empire," he finally said. "Blood and bullets. The old way. He controlled everything south of the river by the time he was 40. And your father? Dead when I was 12. Car bomb." His jaw tightened. "They never found who did it. I have my suspicions now." Elena waited. "My Uncle Vincent took over after that, ran things until I was old enough to inherit. Then he retired. Stepped back. Let me take the throne." Dominic's laugh was bitter. "I thought he was being generous, passing the torch to the next generation. But he wasn't. He was waiting, watching me try to legitimize the business. Move us into construction, shipping, technology. Clean money instead of dirty." Dominic looked at her, firelight reflecting in his gray eyes. Vincent misses the old days. The drugs, the trafficking, the quick money that came with quick bodies. Elena placed her hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension coiled beneath his skin. "He's been undermining me for years," Dominic continued. "I just didn't want to see it. Didn't want to believe that my own blood." His voice cracked. Just slightly, just enough. Elena understood that kind of betrayal. The kind that cut deeper than any knife because it came from the people who were supposed to protect you. She turned his face toward her with gentle fingers. "We'll make him pay," she whispered. "Together." Dominic looked at her, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. The calculation faded. The walls came down. What remained was raw and vulnerable and achingly human. He kissed her. This time it wasn't desperate or fueled by adrenaline. It was slow, deliberate, a promise sealed in firelight and shared pain. Elena kissed him back, her hands finding his face, his neck, pulling him closer. The war could wait until morning. Tonight, they had this. Morning came gray and cold, snow still falling in lazy spirals outside the cabin windows. Elena woke to find Dominic already up, sitting at the rough wooden table with a map of Chicago spread before him. His wounds had stopped bleeding, but the lines of pain around his eyes told her he was far from healed. She poured 2 cups of bitter instant coffee and sat across from him. "It wasn't just Sal," Dominic said without preamble. His finger traced a route on the map. "Sal is a dog. He follows orders. He doesn't have the brains or the ambition to orchestrate something this complex. Someone promised him protection," Elena said. "Someone who could guarantee his safety from the rest of the family if things went wrong." Dominic looked up. Only one person has that kind of power. Elena had known since the gala, since she watched the pieces fall into place with sickening clarity. "Your Uncle Vincent." Dominic's nod was almost imperceptible. "He controls the family trust, the lawyers, the politicians, the offshore accounts. He knows every secret, every weakness, every vulnerability." His voice hardened into something cold and sharp. "He's hated every decision I've made since I took over, every legitimate contract, every clean investment. He thinks I've made us weak. So he made a deal with Marchetti. Marchetti gets the streets, the drug routes, the territory he's always wanted." Dominic's fist clenched on the table. "Vincent gets the assets, the real estate, the political connections. and I end up dead in a parking garage or burned alive in my own home. Elena processed the information, her mind already running tactical calculations. They think you're dead now. Or running. Exactly. Dominic pulled a worn photograph from his pocket. A younger Vincent, smiling at a family gathering, his arm around a 12-year-old Dominic. The image made Elena's stomach turn. By tomorrow morning, Vincent will call a meeting of the capos. He'll declare the throne empty. He'll invite Marchetti to cement their alliance with a formal treaty. Where? The Golden Oak. It's an Italian restaurant downtown. Neutral ground. Every major treaty in Chicago's underworld has been signed there for 50 years. Elena studied the map, memorizing the location, the surrounding streets, the potential entry and exit points. So we hit them there, catch them all together. Dominic shook his head slowly. I can't lead a frontal assault. Not in this condition. I'd be dead before I got through the door. He looked at her, and there was something new in his eyes. Trust. Complete and absolute. I need you to go first. You want me to be bait? No. Dominic reached across the table and took her hand. I want you to destroy them. Vincent knows me. He knows my tactics, my patterns, my weaknesses. He spent 30 years studying how I think. His grip tightened, but he doesn't know Elena Vasquez. He doesn't know what you can do. He thinks you're just a bartender who got lucky in a parking garage. Elena understood. The invisibility that had been her prison was now her greatest weapon. I walk in as staff, she said, thinking aloud. Just another server. They won't look twice at me. I get inside. I gather intelligence. I wait for your signal. And when the signal comes, we burn it all down. Together. Elena looked at the man across from her, wounded, betrayed, burning with a cold fury that matched her own. She had spent 8 years hiding from violence. Now she was going to embrace it. I'm going to need a new uniform, she said. Dominic's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I know a place. The Golden Oak was not merely a restaurant. It was a sanctuary for the untouchable, nestled in the heart of downtown Chicago like a velvet-lined coffin. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across mahogany wainscoting and white linen tablecloths. The air smelled of truffle oil and old money. A single plate of risotto here cost more than Elena used to make in a week of double shifts. Tonight, the heavy oak doors were locked to the public. A discreet closed for private event sign hung in the window, a polite fiction for the underworld coronation taking place inside. Elena stood in the alley behind the restaurant, adjusting her uniform, white button-down shirt, crisp and starched, black vest, slightly too tight across the shoulders, hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her cheekbones sharp as blades. She looked exactly like what she was pretending to be. Invisible, forgettable, help, showtime, she whispered to herself. The kitchen entrance was chaos, steam rising from stock pots, chefs barking orders in Italian, servers rushing in and out with silver trays. Elena slipped through the door and merged with the flow, grabbing a pitcher of ice water from a station as naturally as breathing. No one looked at her twice. No one asked for identification. She was just another body in a uniform, another pair of hands to carry plates and refill glasses. Invisibility achieved. She pushed through the swinging doors into the main dining room. The private event occupied the restaurant's grand salon, a space that could seat 50, but tonight held only a single long table. At its head sat Vincent Caruso, Dominic's uncle, a man of 62 who wore his corruption like a bespoke suit. He swirled a glass of vintage Barolo, the crimson liquid catching the chandelier light like liquid rubies. To his right sat Tony Marchetti, looking somehow even more vulgar in this refined setting. His gold teeth flashed when he laughed. His thick fingers tore at a bread roll, scattering crumbs across the pristine tablecloth. Behind them stood Sal Romano, pale and sweating despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. The traitor, the dog who had sold his master for 30 pieces of silver. 15 armed guards lined the perimeter, men in ill-fitting suits with earpieces, their eyes scanning for threats from outside. They weren't looking at the staff. Elena moved through the room, refilling water glasses with practiced efficiency. Her ears captured every word. Dominic had vision. I'll grant him that, Vincent was saying, his voice carrying the smug satisfaction of a man who believed he had already won. But he was weak. He wanted to legitimize us, build condos and shipping logistics. He sneered. He forgot that the Caruso name was built on fear, not spreadsheets. The streets respect strength, Marchetti agreed, bits of bread flying from his mouth. My boys have already taken the south side. Cops are paid. Competition is scared. Everything is falling into place. And Dominic? One of the capos asked. Marchetti laughed, an ugly sound that made Elena's skin crawl. Dead, went off the cliff at the estate. If the fall didn't kill him, the lake did. Fish are eating him by now. Elena reached Vincent's side, pouring water with steady hands. "A toast," Vincent announced, raising his wine glass, "to new beginnings, to the Caruso family, restored to its proper glory." Glasses clinked around the table. Elena stepped back, her face a mask of professional indifference. She checked her watch. 9 p.m. exactly. Her hand slipped into her apron pocket, fingers finding the small black remote hidden there. It was the size of a car key fob, inconspicuous, deadly. She pressed the button. The sound wasn't a massive explosion. It was a muffled thud from the back of the building, followed by the screech of tearing metal. The reinforced loading dock door being blown off its hinges. The guards tensed, hands going to weapons. "What was that?" Marchetti snapped. "Kitchen accident," Elena said softly, still holding her water pitcher. Then came the roar. It started low, a mechanical growl that vibrated through the floorboards. It grew louder, closer, the unmistakable thunder of a powerful engine being pushed to its limits. The kitchen doors didn't open. They exploded inward, and through the shower of wood and plaster came the black shape of a 1970 Ford Mustang, carrying vengeance in its wake. The Mustang erupted through the kitchen doors like a beast breaking free from its cage. Wood splintered, plaster exploded. The car drifted sideways across the polished hardwood floor, its tires screaming against the varnish, sending tables and chairs flying like bowling pins. A crystal chandelier swayed dangerously overhead, raining down tiny prisms of light. The vehicle slammed to a halt 10 feet from the head table. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Smoke curled from the Mustang's hood. The engine ticked in the sudden quiet. Every person in the room stood frozen, their brains struggling to process the impossible sight before them. Then the driver's door was kicked open. Dominic Caruso stepped out. He was not the polished businessman they knew. Gone was the charcoal suit and silk tie. In their place was black tactical gear, a Kevlar vest strapped over bandaged ribs, his face smeared with grease and ash and cold determination. He moved like a man who had already died once and had nothing left to fear. In his hands was a customized M4 carbine, held in a low, ready position that spoke of military training and absolute lethality. His gray eyes swept the room, finding Vincent at the head of the table. "Check, please," Dominic growled. The room exploded into chaos. "Kill him!" Vincent screamed, diving beneath the tablecloth like the coward he was. The guards reached for their weapons. 15 men, trained and armed, moving as one to eliminate the threat. But they were too slow. Dominic opened fire with surgical precision. Not the wild spray of a desperate man, but the controlled bursts of someone who had been planning this moment for days. 2 guards near the entrance dropped before they could raise their guns, hit in the legs, incapacitated but alive. He wanted witnesses. Elena moved. The helpless waitress act vanished in an instant, shed like a snake's skin. She grabbed the heavy silver serving tray from the sideboard and spun, hurling it through the air like a discus. It struck a guard rushing toward Dominic square in the throat with a sickening crunch. He went down gagging, his weapon clattering to the floor. Elena vaulted over the oak bar, sliding behind its solid bulk as bullets shredded the bottles above her head. Glass and alcohol rained down, filling the air with the sharp scent of whiskey and fear. She reached beneath the bar where she had hidden a Glock 19 3 hours earlier, during her reconnaissance of the building. Her fingers found the weapon, familiar and deadly. 3 on the left balcony, she shouted over the gunfire. "I see them!" Dominic yelled back. He took cover behind the Mustang's engine block, using his father's car as a shield. He suppressed the balcony with a burst of fire, forcing the shooters to duck behind the railing. Elena popped up, fired twice. A guard trying to flank Dominic from the coat check room fell, clutching his knee. They moved like they had been fighting together for years. Elena covering angles, Dominic advancing. Push and pull, attack and defend. A lethal dance choreographed in blood and gunpowder. Marchetti had flipped a heavy table and was using it as cover, firing blindly with a gold-plated Desert Eagle. His shots were wild, destroying more chandeliers than threatening anyone, raining crystal shards down on the combatants. Sal Romano saw his chance. The traitor broke from his position near the wall, sprinting toward the service exit. His eyes were wide with panic, his expensive shoes slipping on the blood-slicked floor. Elena tracked him calmly. She fired once. The bullet caught him in the back of the thigh, and he went down screaming, sliding across the hardwood until he crashed into a toppled chair. Elena walked toward him, her Glock trained on his writhing form. "Stay down, traitor," she said coldly. "Your boss wants a word with you." Sal looked up at her, tears streaming down his face, and saw his death reflected in her dark eyes. "Please," he whimpered. "Please. I was just following orders. Vincent made me do it. He said he would kill my family if I didn't. Save it for someone who cares." Elena pistol whipped him across the temple, and Sal Romano's pleas dissolved into unconsciousness. The gunfire died to silence. Dominic advanced on Marchetti's position, his carbine trained on the overturned table. The rival boss popped up to fire, but Dominic was already there. He stepped inside Marchetti's guard, trapped the gun arm, and delivered a bone-shattering elbow strike to the man's nose. The crack echoed through the ruined restaurant like a punctuation mark. Marchetti collapsed, blood spurting from his shattered face. Dominic kicked the gold-plated Desert Eagle away and pistol-whipped him into unconsciousness with cold efficiency. "Where is he?" Dominic's voice was barely human, a growl from somewhere deep and primal. Elena pointed to the head of the table. The white linen tablecloth trembled. Dominic walked toward it, his boots crunching on broken glass and spent shell casings. He grabbed the fine fabric and ripped it away with a single savage motion. Vincent Caruso cowered beneath the table like a rat in a trap. The man who had orchestrated everything. The uncle who had smiled at family dinners while plotting his nephew's murder. The patriarch who had sold his own blood for power. He looked pathetic now, small. His expensive suit was stained with wine and fear sweat. His silver hair was disheveled. His hands shook as he raised them in surrender. "Dominic," Vincent stammered, his voice cracking. "Nephew, please, this was just business. Just business. We can work something out. I have the offshore accounts. I have the judges. We can rule together. Think of the empire we could build. Business?" Dominic's voice was ice-given sound. "You sold my roots to the cartels. You sent assassins into my home. You put a bounty on the head of the woman who saved my life." He raised the carbine, aiming it squarely at Vincent's chest. "You killed my father." Vincent's eyes went wide. "That wasn't I didn't, the car bomb. 30 years ago. I was 12 years old." Dominic's finger tightened on the trigger. "I finally understand. You've been planning this since before I could shave. Dominic, please don't." The word came from Elena. Dominic froze, the carbine still aimed at his uncle's heart. He turned to look at her, and the rage in his eyes was terrifying to behold. "He deserves to die, Elena. He's a cancer, a rot that's been eating this family from the inside for 3 decades. Elena holstered her Glock and walked toward him, her heels clicking on the glass-strewn floor. She placed her hand on the barrel of his rifle and gently pushed it down. "Death is too easy," she said quietly. "If you kill him, the family rallies around his memory. He becomes a martyr, the beloved uncle murdered by his power-hungry nephew." She met his eyes. "You become the mad dog who killed his own blood." Dominic's jaw clenched. "Then what?" Elena smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who believed in karma, the hard kind that didn't wait for the afterlife. She reached into her vest pocket and pulled out her smartphone. She tapped the screen and turned it around so Vincent could see. A live stream. View count, 23,847 and climbing. "I've been broadcasting since I poured my first glass of water," Elena said coldly. "Every word you said about the heroin trafficking, the bribes to Judge Reed, the murder of Alderman Martinez, the cartel connections, all of it, recorded." Vincent's face went white as bone. "And I didn't just send it to the cloud." Elena swiped the screen. "I sent it to the FBI tip line, the DEA task force, and the personal email of every major news anchor in Chicago." She leaned down, bringing her face close to Vincent's. "You're not going to die tonight, Vincent. You're going to live, and you're going to spend every remaining moment of your miserable existence paying for what you've done." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The sirens grew louder, a chorus of approaching judgment. Dominic stood over his uncle, the carbine still in his hands but no longer aimed. The rage was still there, burning in his chest, but Elena's words had cut through the red haze. She was right. She was always right. Death was mercy, and Vincent Caruso deserved no mercy. "If I killed you now," Dominic said slowly, "your pain would end in a second. One bullet, one heartbeat, gone." He crouched down, bringing his face level with Vincent's terrified eyes. "But this way? You're going to federal prison, Uncle." As a penniless snitch caught on livestream confessing to 30 years of crimes, Vincent's lip trembled. Tears carved tracks through the dust on his face. "You know what they do to men like you in maximum security?" Dominic continued, his voice soft and terrible. "Men who betrayed their own family. Men who ordered hits on women and children. Men who thought they were untouchable." He stood up, looking down at the broken shell of the man who had haunted his family for 3 decades. Your assets will be frozen by morning. Your political friends will deny they ever knew you. Your lawyers will abandon you the moment the retainers stop coming. Dominic's smile was cruel. And you'll spend every remaining day of your miserable life looking over your shoulder in a concrete cell, waiting for the knife that's coming. Vincent slumped against the table leg, all the fight draining out of him. He looked like what he truly was beneath the expensive suits and silver tongue, a small, frightened old man who had finally run out of moves. Dominic turned away from him without another word. He grabbed Marchetti's unconscious body by the collar of his gaudy suit and dragged him toward the loading dock exit. "What are you doing with him?" Elena asked. "Dropping this trash on the precinct steps. A gift for the detectives. They've been trying to pin something on Marchetti for years." He glanced back at the chaos of the dining room. Let him share a cell block with Vincent. They can keep each other company. They walked out through the ruined kitchen, stepping over debris and unconscious bodies. The back alley was dark and quiet, a stark contrast to the war zone they left behind. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was cool and clean, washed fresh by the storm. Chicago glittered in the distance, a million lights twinkling like earthbound stars. The city that had almost killed them both now spread out before them like a promise. Dominic looked back at the Golden Oak. Through the shattered walls, he could see the Mustang, his father's car, buried in rubble and broken furniture. The hood was crumpled, the windshield was gone, oil pooled beneath the engine like black blood. "The Mustang's totaled," he said quietly. There was genuine grief in his voice. Elena leaned against the alley wall, exhaustion finally catching up to her. Her uniform was stained with wine and plaster dust. Her hair had come loose, framing her face in wild strands. "I know a guy," she said. "Sells used Hondas. Very reliable. Excellent cup holders." Dominic stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a deep, rich sound that broke through the tension of the night like sunlight through storm clouds. A real laugh, unguarded and free, from a man who probably hadn't truly laughed in years. He stepped closer to her, ignoring the sirens, ignoring the chaos, ignoring everything except the woman who had saved his life 3 times over. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away a smudge of soot on her cheek. "I think we can afford something better than a Honda," he murmured. "I'm thinking Ferrari. Red, to match the fire in you." Elena smiled, exhausted and exhilarated and alive. "That's terribly impractical, Caruso." "I know." And he kissed her, soft and slow, a promise sealed in the quiet aftermath of war. When they finally pulled apart, Dominic reached into the pocket of his tactical vest. He withdrew a ring. It was heavy platinum, old and worn smooth by decades of use. The Caruso family crest was engraved on its face, a lion rampant over crossed swords. The signet ring of the boss, the symbol of absolute authority. He had taken it from Vincent's trembling finger before leaving the restaurant. Elena looked at the ring, then at Dominic. "What are you doing?" "You don't work for me anymore, Elena Vasquez." Her eyebrow arched. "I'm fired? You're promoted." Dominic took her hand and pressed the ring into her palm, closing her fingers around the cold metal. "Partner, 50-50. The queen doesn't serve the king. She rules beside him." Elena stared at the ring in her hand. It was heavier than she expected, weighted with history and blood and power. A week ago, she had been a bartender counting tips and eating instant noodles. Now she held the symbol of Chicago's most powerful family in her palm. She looked up at the man who had dragged her out of her invisible life and thrown her into the fire. The man who had seen her, truly seen her, when the rest of the world looked right through. "Partner," she agreed, her fist closing around the ring. "But I have one condition." "Anything." Elena glanced back at the destroyed restaurant, smoke still rising from the shattered windows, sirens growing ever closer. "Next time," she said, "we order takeout. I'm really tired of tipping." Dominic grinned, a real grin, boyish and free, that transformed his face into something almost beautiful. He took her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers, and together they slipped into the shadows of the alleyway. They vanished into the Chicago night just as the SWAT team kicked down the front doors of the Golden Oak. The bartender was gone forever. The queen had arrived, and that is how Elena Vasquez went from mixing cocktails to ruling the underworld. It proves that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one you overlook. The invisible girl in the corner, the quiet worker taking out the trash, the woman you dismiss as decoration. This story teaches us that our past, no matter how painful, can become our greatest strength. Elena spent 8 years running from who she was, hiding the skills her father had given her, trying to be invisible. But when the moment came, when someone needed her, she didn't hesitate. She became the weapon she was always meant to be. Not for destruction, but for protection. It reminds us that true partnership is built on mutual respect and equality. Dominic didn't offer Elena a job at the end. He offered her a throne. Because he understood that someone who saves your life 3 times, who stands beside you in the fire, deserves to stand beside you in victory. And perhaps most importantly, it shows us that the best revenge isn't violence, it's justice. Elena could have let Dominic kill Vincent, but she chose a harder path, one that would ensure the guilty faced consequences while the innocent were protected. Sometimes karma doesn't need our help. It just needs a live stream and an internet connection. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, action, and karma, please smash that like button. It really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you more stories like this one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We upload exciting content every day, and we don't want you to miss a single moment. Tell me in the comments below, what would you have done if you were in that parking garage? Would you have run to safety? Or would you have stepped out of the shadows and fought? I want to hear from the depths of your heart, your stories, your thoughts, your connections to your own life. They mean everything to us. How did this story make you feel? Did Elena's journey remind you of times when you felt invisible? Did Dominic's betrayal by his own family echo something in your experience? Share your reflections with us. We read every single comment, and your words inspire our next stories. Thank you so much for watching until the very end. Your support means the world to us. We wish everyone watching this video good health, happiness, and peace in your daily life. May you find the strength to step out of the shadows when your moment comes. Goodbye for now, and we will see you in the next video.